Welcome to Backstage with the Baronsmen, a deep dive into the inner workings of a historical theater company in Austin, Texas. In today's episode, we chat with Stephanie Crugnola, actress, teacher, director, and founder of Walking Shadow Shakespeare Project. We also have Anneliese Friend, a very experienced actress, particularly in all things Bard related. Fun fact, she also has performed on the stage at the Globe in London. Finally, rounding out this stellar triumvirate. Inside joke is none other than Robert Deike, a dramaturg, Shakespeare nerd, and actor extraordinaire. You might have seen him perform with different companies around town. All right, so we'll be covering some spooky historical literature in today's podcast. So first of all, we're going to start with Miss Stephanie. Tell us about your experience with Shakespeare and what really makes you nerd out about him, and maybe also cover a little bit of what got you interested in the Bard.
Yeah. So when I was in second grade, my older sister was in fourth grade, and she convinced her fourth grade teacher to let her perform an abridged version of The Tempest that she directed and also starred as Prospero in. And so like me and my other little sister got to go see it. And I just remember her being in this like cape with stars and moons on it. And I was like, this is cool. This is peak cool. Like, I don't know if you can get cooler than what my sister is doing right now. So that piqued my interest. And then in my freshman year of college, of high school was Romeo and Juliet. And I got in a fight with my teacher about the legitimacy of their love, and then sophomore year I had 3 different teachers in a span of a month, and we did act 1 of Macbeth 3 different times, and it was like, I get it, I understand this now. So I just kind of like let myself roll with it, and it all just kind of went from there. And yeah, I guess my experience with it, I have been running Walking Shadow Shakespeare Project for about 9 years now, which is a New England-based Shakespeare company. Right now, we're just doing 1 show a year. We all get together, we rehearse over Zoom, and then we show up in a park and rehearse for 1 day and then do the show, which is a little wild, but it's very fun. And I do a Shakespeare podcast called Protest Too Much, where I fight and yell a lot, which is really like my love of Shakespeare. I love yelling about things that have no relevance, like which character would have the best Tinder profile. And I also have a master's degree in early modern English literature. So that's, I guess, the legitimate part of it. But yes, Malvolio was the choice. Yeah.
Miss Anneliese.
Hi, yeah, so my name is Anneliese Friend. I go by she, her, hers, and I honestly can't remember the first time I got excited about Shakespeare, but I can remember the first time I felt good about Shakespeare. I was a freshman year of high school, and we were reading A Midsummer's Night Dream for our Shakespeare play. And everybody had to memorize a monologue, and to get extra credit, you could memorize extra lines. So I memorized Helena's first monologue, the entire thing. And I was always a super nerd and never had any friends in high school. But when I did that monologue, everybody was so impressed, and they said, yes, she's such a good actress. And I think that that's when the bug bit me. And when the venom ran through my veins was I was doing an acting class in my bachelor's, my undergrad, because I was a theater major. A guy who had directed some shows and acted in some shows at the Chicago Shakespeare Company, which is actually quite a reputable company in the US, he said to me, this is what you're meant to do. You are meant to do Shakespeare. And that's when I was like, that's it. I'm not doing anything else. Goodbye, modern theater. I don't know anything else. So after that, I did a master's degree at the University of Exeter in staging Shakespeare, where I got to perform on the Globe stage, and I got to do in-depth workshops with all of the with the movement teachers and the speech coaches, etc., at at the Globe. And ever since then, I just can't look back. And I think the thing that I love about Shakespeare the most, not only is the history of it, because I'm a big history nerd, but also that Shakespeare in his language gives you clues on how to act. He tells you what to do, where to breathe, how to make it sound good. And now if you give me a modern text, a modern monologue, I'm like, I don't know. I can't do it. I'm lost. So yeah, it's like this puzzle that you need to put together. But once you do, it's like an acting cheat sheet. And that's what I love about Shakespeare.
And Mr. Deike.
I remember having read Shakespeare in high school, but it didn't exactly sort of like, the ball didn't start rolling then because, I didn't understand, any of it. But there was one time when I decided that I heard that Shakespeare did something called a comedy, and it was called Taming of the Shrew. So I went down to the library and I checked it out, and I read it and I barely understood it. But it was when I was in my high school, I believe it was my senior class, we were reading, and I got up there to read, and I was reading The Ghost. And then suddenly I went up there with the deep voice and just went up there and went after it. I didn't know maybe what I was saying, but I was just saying words. And that sort of piqued my interest. But I was a very shy, retiring child for most of my childhood, and had never even considered being a performer. I thought maybe being a comedian of some kind, but was too scared until I lucked into what's called the Shakespeare at Wyandotte program at the University of Texas at Austin. I got in a spring class in 1986, played Touchstone the Clown, which is the most nonsensical and hard to understand character in all of Shakespeare. And I made people laugh. And after that, I kept going to the UT class. I took it 4 summer semesters. I helped out with 3 spring semesters. 3 spring semesters. Probably in that time did 14 plays and about of Shakespeare plays in about 4 years, and then started doing other things outside of it. And then just things kind of rolled from there, and I just kept performing. And nobody was really saying you have a gift. I had to just believe in myself and do it. But people kept laughing, and so I just kept learning and learning and learning and learning. I've been in most all Shakespeare plays except for 7, the ones you don't do, King John and Henry VIII, and oh my gosh. I have been in Titus, but anyway, so I've been doing this for a long time. The thing I love about Shakespeare is, and I'm going to go to metaphor Thimley land and talk about the movie Airplane, which I saw as a young kid and laughed through the entire thing. But Airplane is one of those movies that there's so many jokes, there's so many things going on at the same time that you can go and re-look at it and go wait, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is wearing his basketball outfit as we're pulling him away. I didn't see that before. Or other things. I was watching it again just the other day, and he's at the port of Drambuie, and now I know what Drambuie is, right? But before then, it was just Drambuie, that's a place, right, in India, right? So I would say that Shakespeare is like that to me. That every time I pick up any of his works, anything that he has or does, I may have thought, I understand this right now, and I have an understanding, and there's some basic understandings, but there are words that then you look at and go, wait a minute, that word is in this position, and it's in the contrapuntal position, and this one's in this, and you start finding other new things that you hadn't thought of before. And so that's one of the things I feel Shakespeare is good at, is because it's fecund ground. It's 400 years of fecund ground, and that's not a curse word. And so it just kept me sort of interested. I've gone on and done other things me and my friends did a version of Reefer Madness that I painstakingly attempted to write down the words, even though it was not very easily understood. And but all that stuff is very textual based. And so I feel that Shakespeare as a text is what excites me about Shakespeare. Acting is kind of secondary. Jokes. I like to tell jokes. I like to have Shakespeare stuff. Maybe I'll cry occasionally. And that's it for me.
All right. Well, Miss Jackie, how did you?
Oh, me? Oh,
Yeah.
God. I probably don't fit into this. I'm like the square and the round hole in this group because I am the complete opposite. My background or whatever, how that is. Like, you don't give me that look. That was my crazy, I don't know. No, my background is all modern theater. I think maybe I read Shakespeare maybe once in high school, junior high, whatever. And then not
So
telling.
like Moliere.
Yeah.
What's that one about the monk that's like he's an imposter?
There's a rhinoceros.
Yeah.
One of those things? No, like that was what my background is all. Well, I have a BA in music. I studied opera, and that's what I did for college. And so acting really wasn't acting. It was you were acting, but it's a totally different thing to sing, project, move, still sing, all that sort of stuff. It took some acting in college, not a lot. And then, and I don't think we did much Shakespeare at Cornell at the time. Like it was I don't know, it was really interesting. We did Lion of Winter, and that was awesome. The set was insane. Costumes were insane. I was in that, but it wasn't until Colorado that we did A Midsummer's Night's Dream, but we did it as a doo-wop, a 50s doo-wop.
Wow.
And it was really brilliant. He cut like a lot of the script, but he used songs to represent the text.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, I think, that didn't really know how to comprehend Shakespeare or whatever, they were like, that helped so much. And so we did that. And then we did As You Like It. And I was LeBeau, Hyman, I don't know. But what I loved about that, I got so into it, like, there was a picture of me in the paper as LeBeau. I didn't even recognize myself. I was like, I had to double check a look. I was like, oh, that is me. But so it is really, for me, text is challenging, and I come from a different way. Excuse my French, but I remember a coach saying the text is your bitch. You use that text, the text doesn't use you. And so that's a very different mindset of acting in a sense. But I really think in like working with Deike, working with Liegh, Anneliese, Stephanie, like you really can use so many different tools in the toolbox, right? And really when you comes down to it, we're going for the same thing. Either you're using, like you said, exactly like Anneliese said, and Deike's worked with me as a dramaturg for Macbeth and As You Like It, or not As You Like It, Love's Labor. You use it for your acting tools, exactly. And so it's just wrapping, for me, it's trying to wrap my brain, which is more about a bit of the emotion. have a Meisner background, so it's pretty wild to make it work. And I'm still learning and trying to trust with that. And for me, like to have the ability to be able to switch back and forth is going to be great, because I love Shakespeare and I love history like y'all as well. But I also like, film and the modern stuff and things you can do with film. So, but yeah, I'm sure people that are Shakespeare scholars are like, ee! When they try to teach me, and I'm like, what? So anyways, that's me. Liegh.
I was born doing Shakespeare.
Yeah, she came out of the womb like that.
No, when I was 5 years old, the local high school was doing a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and the director, who would later become my director in high school and everything, Mr. J, he had this wacky idea for little kids to play all the fairies, like Moth and Mustard Seed and Peas Blossom. Well, I was Moth, and the only line I can remember is that, "Here I am." I said it every time I came on stage. "Here I am." But I really got into it. Like, you could see me backstage, and I would watch the kids, the high schoolers and everything, doing their roles and everything. And I fell in love with the role of Oberon because the guy who was doing it was just, in my 5-year-old mind, he was just the bomb in all things. He was pretty. He was smart. He said all these really great words in a really great way. And he like captured me and everything. So I'd always been a really avid reader and advanced above my 5-year-old range. But I conquered those reading roadblocks and things that you get to and everything, just so I could start reading Shakespeare. So by the time I was in the 2nd grade, I had read a majority of his stuff.
Wow.
And then in junior high, I was a part of the theater company, the Mance Park Players. And then in high school as well. So I've been doing it then, all that. And then I worked with a theater company up in Pennsylvania where we did some Shakespeare and stuff, and I directed a bunch of stuff there. And then I moved back to Austin and was like, went on a bunch, I bet most of you guys can attest to feeling this pain as well of, I went on over 200 auditions and never got cast. Some of them I didn't even go and thanks, no thanks. So I just had to wait for the cast list to come out and stuff. And then a friend of mine said, hey, have you heard about this group called the Baronsmen? They're putting on a show called The Tempest. And I'm like, oh, I was like, all right, I'll go audition. What's the worst they can tell me? No, because it's not like I haven't heard that a million times before. And I came and I auditioned, and they were like, oh, you're great, love you, we'll let you know, and everything like that. And like a week later, the cast list came out, and I went looking for my name, and I could not find it because they totally misspelled my name. And so I'm like, oh, well, there's another no. And then I got an email from the director, and I'm like, she was like, welcome to the Baronsmen and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what's, huh? So I went back to the cast list, and I was like, oh, hey, I'm cast as Miranda. Okay, let's let a 30-year-old woman play the role of a 15-year-old. Great. And ever since then, I've been with the Baronsmen. I've primarily just done historical theater with the Baronsmen, but I have done some other things around town. But for the most part, it's the Bard or nothing.
Here.
You're here.
Awesome.
All right, y'all. Boom, boom, boom. All right, so let's talk about spooky literature. So yeah, it's going to be whoa, all over the place a little bit, but so kind of just kick us off a little bit. We're going to say, obviously we all love history. We're all kind of history nerds here. So what do you think, going back to good old Shakespeare's time, Elizabethan time, all that sort of stuff, obviously writers write about things that are going on, current times, that sort of thing. What do you think were some of the influences that caused Shakespeare and his partners, his friends, whoever, to write about the macabre, ghosts, all that sort of stuff? Do you guys know in your research and study, were there certain events that were happening that you can now, reading his plays, say, that's probably in reference to what was maybe happening at the current times? Kind of a little out there, but what are your thoughts?
So I'm gonna point out what I feel like is the obvious here, in that religion was the law of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Elizabethan / Jacobean mind frame of how the world worked was also very linear. So we had heaven, and then between heaven and earth was quote unquote the ether. And then between the ether, there was the earth, and then you had the hierarchy of the creatures. So it was man, and then mammals, and then plants, and then below that was the earth, and below that was hell, and where the demons dwelled. And you can see that within the structure of the early modern theater. You have what we call the heavens above, where, for instance, the Tempest, Juno and the other goddesses come down from. And then you have the trapdoors underneath, which is where the demons of Faustus or Caliban and the Tempest will come up from. It is a very linear of this is how we structure the world. Because if you didn't structure the world that way, everybody would lose their damn minds, because there wasn't science yet to explain the world. So I think that is a very obvious reason of why certain plays focus on the macabre, focus on hell, focus on demons, is because, as Deike's dogs,
all right, I'm going.
Tell you, they are fighting the demons from hell. I'm sure the maw of hell opens into Deike's house.
Yes.
That is how you structure the world. So it was part of them making sense of their own existence.
I love it. And that's exactly true. I mean, you look at even the curtain theater, you have heaven, you have hell, you have exactly like what you're just talking about. And it's crazy to think of. Also, as you were just saying that, I was thinking of, it's so insane how his literature is still so relevant today, but we've evolved so much from just religion, I think, in many ways. So yeah. Any other?
Yeah, their lives were awful in so many ways. Public executions and people dying just in the streets. Like, there was so much death and so many questions. And when you have a plague time and everyone around you is dying, like that's going to spark a lot of questions on what happens. And so, like that, they didn't have, besides the structure of religion, there wasn't a release of, like the freedom of talking about what happens after we die, and could it, like, so I think that a lot of the prevalence of ghosts, and obviously in the past couple months we've had a lot of talk of the fact that we don't really see plague in Shakespeare's plays, but we still see the effects of it. We see the fascination with ghosts and the afterlife, and that kind of opportunity for redemption versus condemnation for all of their sins. And I think that a lot of it comes from just how gruesome death was and needing something after it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, I can't imagine. Like, you just think back and read stuff, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, you think of someone, not to get too graphic, but like hanging in the square and the birds just eating them, and that's a sight. That's normal, just it's normal life. It's what you walk past, and that, like, when it transfers to entertainment, like, it has to come out somewhere. And I think this is how some of that comes out.
Art imitating life.
Yeah. Art releasing a bit of something from life.
Cathartic.
Yeah.
Jackie?
This is I'm a history major, so I just looked something up. It was an interesting time at that point because just real quickly, it used to be that Catholicism was the rule of the land. Everyone was Catholic until Henry VIII decided he needed to get a divorce. And so he went ahead and created his own church primarily to do that. And then it took off, And so you had two different worldviews that were sort of like kind of like colliding with each other. And you can see them happening in Shakespeare too. So the Catholics believed in the heaven, the hell, but they also believed in that middle place purgatory where you could go and hang out, and, if you did good works and stuff, you could probably go back up to heaven, right? The Protestant reformers, the radicals, they said, no, there's only just heaven and hell. There is no middle purgatory. And when you die, you go to these places, you don't stick around. So the Catholic conservatives believed more in ghosts, and that ghosts were things that they could see. The Protestant reformers are like, no, there's not ghosts. Those are devils. And so Hamlet's conundrum, is this the ghost of his father or is it a devil, is exactly kind of what was going on in the, sort of the religious thinking of the time. And so you see, and because Elizabeth was a Protestant, and James the First, her successor, was also Protestant. And so, and he was a very devout person. He was a very thoughtful king, and he wrote things like Demonology, which was a treatise on what demons were. And also, I guess in some sense, he was saying there's no such things as ghosts. An interesting thing is the ghost of Banquo then, because Macbeth was written during the Jacobean times. Was he a demon? Was he a ghost? What was he? And so those questions were a part of the entertainment and gave the sort of like, oh man, I'm thinking about stuff. I went to the play and I'm thinking, and that's, and so I feel that the religious moments of those time is what gave, the Shakespeare and Marlowe with Faustus, those thoughts, but they were thoughts in transition. So it's interesting to see how they were transitioning from one to another, and how you saw that happen. And then at the end, when Shakespeare's doing the, like the Tempest, where there are demons, but there's also spirits. Like he took everything that the English sort of thought about, the religious, the folklore, and kind of like crammed it all together in this one beautiful play called The Tempest. And so I feel like that is almost Shakespeare's kind of like, this is what I think about it. Everything's great. I'm going to quit. Bye.
So to piggyback off of what Deike is saying here, he makes a really good point that within, okay, so let's say Elizabeth died in 1603, and then that's when James I/James VI took over. It had only been 100 years since Henry VIII had been in power, and probably 50 or 60 years since the Reformation of going from stout Catholicism to Protestantism. And in that between time, we had Mary, Bloody Mary, trying to convert everybody back to Catholicism. So everybody's really confused.
Yeah.
Nobody's been raised a certain way to believe this, that, or the other thing, because every 2 seconds something has changed. So maybe you believed one thing, but your grandmother believed another thing, and she's telling you these superstitions, but you're taught by your different church to believe other superstitions. So it's a really the spirits and the what happens to life after death being sorted out or being processed through art makes a lot of sense, because nobody knows what the hell's happening right now. Nobody knows what to believe.
Well, and you bring up a good point too, that like how knowledge was passed amongst people was very different than obviously now, but even, it was word of mouth. It was certain people could read, certain people couldn't. You would maybe go see a play, obviously, to hear things, or you would go hear a speaker. But it's wild to think of some of the things that people believed in back then, but it makes sense when you look at the times and what was going on. So, yeah.
And then also, to point a big finger at the obvious, they were in Deike. They were in business to make money. They were in business to make money. You know what makes money? Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, or
11 bajillion.
11 bajillion. And they were in competition with other groups, and they had to one up each other of who could draw in the biggest crowd. We obviously, this is something that's talked about over and over again, but Shakespeare we consider now as like high art, but back in the day it was low art. It was who can show the bloodiest thing to draw in the biggest crowd. And I think that that's really obvious with Titus Andronicus being one of Shakespeare's earlier plays. And I will humbly admit that I don't know too much about Titus Andronicus, except for children get baked in a pie, and then the dad eats the pie.
Middleton wrote the first act. Middleton wrote the first act, right?
And then some poor lady gets her arms and her tongue chopped off. Yeah.
Among other things.
And that's just a testament to the fact that I have a master's degree in Shakespeare and I still don't know everything there is to know about Shakespeare.
Right.
So somebody who has a better knowledge of Titus Andronicus, please take over. I yield the floor.
I won't, because I'll talk about it for an hour. I love Titus. It's one of my favorites.
All right, 4 bullet points, Steph. 4 bullet points.
One thing I will say about Titus, it's like you can see, so Shakespeare came onto the scene with Richard III, right? Where he had sort of an evil king where you could sort of like do this. And I'm not sure where Titus sort of came in on that, because I think, like I said, the first act is Middleton, the rest of it is Shakespeare. So, but it was like it was like Jaws for Spielberg, right? And actually, I look at Shakespeare much like I see Spielberg and how his overall sort of like changed over time. And, and was like, the comedies and all that. And then things got thoughtful, and then things got, at the end crazy. So it's interesting to see how Titus is one of the first things, but it's also like the most sort of like easiest to kind of like process your head around. The other plays, you have to sort of like think about and see how you respond to them.
But it's all still pop. Like it's all pop theater.
Yes.
It's pop entertainment. And like that's what always gets me about Shakespearean scholarship. Like, classical literature. Like it's not. It is classical because it was written a long time ago, but it was modern theater. Yeah. It was
pop culture.
it was meant to entertain. Yeah. And it like, it wasn't meant to, in the way that you watch a good movie, you watch Parasite and you leave a little rattled and thinking a lot. Like that's still pop entertainment.
Right.
And that's what Shakespeare was and is, and I guess can be, if you don't treat it like a
Can't like canon, like it's.
yeah.
That being said, he never lost it. So one of my favorite stories, and I really don't know whether this is true or not, and I don't think that we'll ever really know whether this is true or not, but in King Lear, which is one of Shakespeare's later plays, there's a character called Kent who loses an eyeball. And the myth is that they took a sheep's eye and palmed it as if they were, you know, like a magician would. And when they plucked out Kent's eyeball, they flicked the sheep's eye into the crowd. Oh my God. And that's one of my favorite stories.
It's the Eli Roth of the time.
Right? You know, like that's their special effects there. And it doesn't get old, does it? We always want to see the gruesome. We want to be scared.
Right. And like a couple of years ago, the Globe did Titus and half a dozen people fainted on opening night. Like that's
and vomited.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the Titus I want to do. That's the Titus I want to do.
People vomiting. That's the apex of acting is the vomit.
No, and going back to like the influences of the time and everything, you guys were talking about how it was always changing from one ruler to the next. I mean, you had Henry VIII who started out Catholic and then created his own church, and then Mary came on and she was like, no, Catholicism, and like murdered anybody who said anything other. And then when she passed on, you had Elizabeth, who was a little, we like to think that she was benign and loving and everything, but I mean, she kind of did the same thing too, just not to the greatest extent that her predecessors did. But then you get to King James the First, who was obsessed with witches and witchcraft, and everything he did was centered on that. So that also played off because it was a time, if you go back to like, if you think just to our American history with the Salem witch trials and stuff like that, people were dying because some bratty little buttheads, I edited myself, some bratty little buttheads were like, I don't like her. She's a witch. She cursed me. And it was very similar to that during King James's time and everything. And so that, like Stephanie was saying, that has to come out somehow.
But also, Lee, who's paying these folks? Who's paying the kingsmen? Who's paying the chamberlain's men?
And that's true. They have patrons that they have to be loyal to and do certain things for if they want to continue to have the funding to be able to put on the shows.
So if they incite fear of witchcraft, you know, that's going to put more coins in their own pocket.
Yep.
You know, like who is the person that they're pleasing? Yes, it is the crowds. They are trying to get those, you know, apprentices who don't have anything to do in the middle of the day to come spend their hard-earned cash at their place, but also, you know, they're trying to get a court performance. They're trying to keep their patrons going. So they need to make sure that they are on point and not offending folks. And also in, you know, what's unfortunately still the trend of the day is keep the message on point of who's paying you.
That's why I like the idea of Shakespeare being a businessman, and that's it. You don't need to know anymore. I mean, he wrote all these things, but he did it to make a buck and to, you know, make a name for himself, and it's kind of all you need to know.
If you want to see a Shakespeare expert's head just spin off its shoulders, just tell them that Shakespeare wasn't trying to make art. He was trying to buy the next pint of beer. He was trying to pay for the rent for his room and for all of the little his comforts and stuff like that. So while, yes, we consider it art and everything like that, he was just trying to make bank. That's all he was trying to do.
It's art and you can't touch it.
How
In fact,
dare
let's put it in
you?
concrete
You
and
gotta
drop it
you
to a
gotta
lake.
put on a voice when you act it
He is
too.
The Bard.
And that is a whole other podcast that we will touch on in the future.
I get that.
So I have this little book in my hand. It's a book that I found in an antique shop in England. And it is 6 plays by Elizabethan playwrights. And in here, I have many such hits as The Night of the Burning Pistol
Love it.
and The Shoemaker's Holiday.
Love it.
I was in that. Yay.
But I also have The White Devil
Yeah.
Ooh.
and The Duchess of Malfi.
Ooh.
The Duchess of Malfi, I was privileged enough to see at the Sam Wanamaker Theater with Gemma. Oh God, what's her name?
Arterton.
Yep, that's the one.
Mm.
And to be honest with you, I can barely remember what happened in that play.
Oh shit.
I know
Does
there
she Malfies a lot? I don't know.
were the Duchess of Malfi. There were a lot of dead bodies, as I remember.
There's a lot of dead bodies.
There's a lot of dead bodies. There was some insinuated incest, as I recall.
I don't think it was insinuated.
But I don't really know anything about the White Devil. So if anybody wants to,
It's a cool.
discussion.
There's one scene that's cool.
There's
So,
this one scene.
This is one scene where like we're saying the word,
Yeah. Webster
Oh
likes
my
that word a lot.
God.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, he does.
that was the
So-
devil for Webster was that, it seems.
So I kind of want to talk about, and this might be controversial, and we can cut this out if we need to, how violence against women was a way to think about sex when you couldn't think about sex.
Interesting.
Wow. That hadn't been a topic that we had considered. But I mean, it's very relevant today because a lot of the shoestrings that reached all the way back to those times and everything, and even before that, still kind of exist today in a lot of ways. We've gotten better as human beings, thank God, that this isn't the norm and stuff like that. But there's still, I mean, you see it all the time. You see it in the news. Victim blaming, victim shaming, what were you wearing kind of crap. So I think it's an interesting topic, but I don't want to scare people away from but I think it's a very valid topic that we should talk about in another podcast of feminism and how women were handled at that time and everything. Because I think, oh my goodness, that would be a bomb topic.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that too.
Yeah.
It should surprise nobody.
I'm thinking about Lavinia and Titus Andronicus and the Duchess of Malfi, and as far as I can recall, it seems like cruelty against women is a way to think about sex when you couldn't think about sex,
Yeah.
And you know what, Deike, you can just put mute on right now. It's fine. No.
No. I do feel also that another sort of like interesting idea is that because even though homosexuality was frowned upon, guys could diddle guys because that at least is not going to get someone pregnant and someone's estates, put into sort of arrears. So there was a lot of down low hooking up that they don't particularly talk about. And folks like Marlowe, I think, sort of like came out of that. So.
Yeah.
What would you say is Marlowe's greatest macabre play, Deike?
Macabre play, I guess, would be Faustus.
Yeah.
Although say the Edward II is actually the one that I think one of the ones he almost got in trouble with, and I think it was the Paris one. I forget.
The Massacre at Paris.
Yeah, that's right. But I think Edward II, because of the sort of him and the guy Havelock, I think his name was, it seemed like that was a queer relationship. And then pretty soon Marlowe's dead, right? So you're kind of like,
In the most horrific way ever.
Right. There's so many different, yeah. Anyway.
So do we think that macabre plays or supernatural plays was a way to explain away science, or was it a way to uplift science? So I know that Jackie talked a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe and Mary Shelley at the beginning of this podcast. And I think a lot of that obsession with death and obsession with bodies and things like that was out of a blossoming of the more discovery of science within that time, within the 1800s, within the 19th century. Do we think that that trickles down to Shakespeare and his contemporaries, or was it a later discovery?
John Webster actually has a line specifically where he says, a whore is worse than dead bodies that are begged at gallows and wrought upon by surgeons to teach man wherein he is imperfect.
Ooh, say that again, once more with feeling.
The poor part side is the most part, right? But yeah, that they are as bad as dead bodies begged at gallows and wrought upon by surgeons to teach man wherein he is imperfect. And so that Webster was not a contemporary. He was, again, in the Shakespeare in Love movie, he was the little kid who liked the bubbies, right?
Yeah, a little bit later, yeah.
So he's a little, so generational. He's probably, James is probably already passed on by that time. I'd have to check the timeline on that for sure. So he was writing, and his macabre was, very specific to him, it seems to me.
Yeah, he was a little bit more focused.
But the only thing I'd say with Shakespeare is the dead Indian line that they talk about in The Tempest. And I think that was like way towards the end. He never really got into, I think he was just telling stories like Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? As opposed to something I guess Webster took as granted when he was writing. So it might be that same sort of like things were changing from one way to another, and Shakespeare just sort of like, was in the middle of it, and you see that change in his work.
How many ghosts do we know in Shakespeare?
Like personally?
No, I
want to, if we're talking ghosts in scenes, we talk about Macbeth, we talk about Hamlet. I don't think anyone gives enough credit to the ghost scene in Richard III, and I think it might be the best ghost scene in all of Shakespeare.
Yes.
Despair and die, one after another, and then live and whatever the other, like that's where you really see that idea of good and evil, and judgment for your on earth life coming into play, is that scene, because you have all of these ghosts for Richard and they're just like, dashing and dashing and dashing. Then on the other side, you've got this like uplifting, heroic, it's just such a good ghost scene. And I feel like it doesn't get lumped in with those spooky Shakespeare scenes enough. And maybe that's because
point stuff.
We don't know how to do ghosts on stage, for all intents and purposes, we are limited by our technology. Whereas they were almost freed by their lack of technology because there were no cinematic expectations of a ghost. So they were just like, oh, he's got blood on him, he's a ghost. And then, alternately, like we expect special effects now. And so we don't accept the ghosts as much. So maybe that's why it's not as...
It's hard for a real person to do it too. Like we just can't get past the idea that, wait, that's an actor, and so he's really not a ghost. Whereas for them, they may not be able, they may have like, wow, I believe he's a ghost. Oh no, afterwards, but because they believed in that stuff, it was a good key for them.
You looked at my goat wrong and you're a witch because you cursed my goat, I can believe in the phantasma as much as I can believe in you cursing my goat. Another thing I kind of brought up with Steph in a discussion a few weeks ago was when she was talking about they don't have the technology to create these scenes, but there was a shift in technology coming from the Elizabethan age into the Jacobean age. And by that, I mean going from the outdoor theaters to the Blackfriars, to the indoor theaters, to the court theaters. They had lights, they had candles that they could swing down, that they could then pull up, that they had mirrors behind candles in order to reflect light. And I think that is worth noting as well in these kind of phantasmic things that we talk about with The Tempest, or even with a comedy like A Winter's Tale, where all of a sudden this statue, which was quote unquote just a statue, suddenly comes to life and is the woman.
That's
Tell
not
me,
creepy at all.
tell me more about Macbeth and maybe the later writers like John Webster and how they would utilize those theaters to their advantage.
Oh my goodness.
Tell me anybody. I want to spark the discussion. I'm one of those like,
I'm with you.
tell me more about this because I have my own ideas, but I like to hear from other folks.
Y'all, we have about 5 minutes and we're gonna wrap it up.
Are you kidding? I could talk for another hour.
I know.
Yeah, I know. It's sort of like, yeah, la 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 la. I mean, to that end, it's like, you know, the idea of ghosts showing up at Richard's time and that one specific scene probably blew people's brains, right? We did have Marlowe. I'm not sure when Faustus came in relation to Richard. They were probably close to each other, but I always feel that Marlowe got there first. But yeah, sort of like that idea, like ghosts just showing up was probably an effect. That was a special effect. The ghost of Hamlet walking through in his armor was the special effect.
Yeah.
And so, but as you get more sophisticated, so too does theater until you get something like opera, which is, you know, and ballet and all the things as you know, we start building on top of it. So
Yeah.
that's my answer to that particular thought in a quick way.
I mean, the revealing of dead bodies in an indoor theater versus in an outdoor theater, I feel like is that hits, as the kids say.
It's a little bit more
it's
visceral and
Yeah.
intimate whenever you see it, when it's because you see the vastness of, like, even though you're in like a theater like the Baron's Men plays in, even though we're an outdoor theater, we're still kind of closed in a little bit and everything, but there's still that feeling that you're still on the outside. It's still bigger and everything like that. So it doesn't seem as terrible when you see those things on that stage. But if you were to take it into like a Blackfriars Box style theater and everything, where everybody's a little closer and everything like that, and you see a dead body, I mean, it's a little bit more touching and everything, where it's like, okay, you can't avoid this because it's right there in front of you and you have no place to go. So
I will say the play Species of Horror, that's another incestual thing. And
I love that
the dude
play.
at one point kills her and pulls out her heart and squeezes it, right? So, I mean, that was again like who at that point where you're just the one-upping each other on how to, you know, outgross.
What play was that?
That would be 'Tis Pity She's a Whore.
Yes.
it's
It's an
another
unfortunate
horror
game.
play.
When are we
It
gonna
is a
read
play about
that?
incest. It's great.
When are we gonna read these plays? Damn it.
Oh, I've got them
Yeah, I
all.
will read that. I mean,
right
that plays
here.
a mind thing. I had to censor myself.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna kind of wrap it up, but we always end with some cray questions, fun questions, whatever you want to call them. So, because I know we got a kind of hard stop at 8:10. Woo! I'm like 8:10. I can speak. Lee, do you want to do number 5?
I do. Who is your favorite? Okay, Lee's having a day. Okay. Who is your favorite spooky or horror author? And maybe a book.
Okay.
Okay, you said Poe. I heard Poe.
Yeah.
Just anything
Go.
Poe?
All Poe.
All Poe. All of it. All of it. Deike?
Certain aspects of H.P. Lovecraft that aren't the racist crap. The idea that you are an insignificant blot where forces that don't really care about you and are sort of inimical to you continue to do things that you don't understand, and you'll just go insane. That's kind of horror.
Nice. Anneliese?
I'm gonna go with a writer who wrote some screenplays when I was a young 14-year-old, and I'm gonna go with M. Night Shyamalan. I love me a plot twist, and boy, does he know how to write you a plot twist.
Agree to disagree. I like his movies. Like the Sixth Sense is fantastic.
I love The Sixth Sense. I also love The Village, and that's maybe because they're living out my dream of pretending it's a different time period while living in a current time period.
Oh my God, we can have an Elizabethan boot camp.
Fuck yes. Oh,
Let's do
sorry.
Oh man,
I
mine.
mean, heckin' yeah. Let's do
Jackie, what's yours?
You guys, I don't read. I'm a movie person. It's horrible.
Well, it's a movie. I mean, it's a work of.
I said M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah, I think probably it's still Halloween, man. The first one. I don't know what it is. It's classic. I try to watch it every year. Yeah, and then I mean, it just is like, I don't know what it is. Halloween 2 is another one. Those two, like, I'll still watch them. I live by myself, so I'll probably, freak myself out, but I'll still do it.
Go snuggle your cats.
My favorite spooky, I'm kind of a classics girl. I love Bram Stoker's Dracula. I love it. I mean, it's kind of the one, it's not the first horror novel, but it's kind of the horror novel between that and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein that kind of really brought that to the forefront, and it made it possible for there to be more. But my more modern one is my favorite author, hands down, is Laurel K. Hamilton. She writes about vampires and werewolves, and I mean, there's other things in there too, but that's the main focus of it, and some of it is quite horrifying.
Can I say Stephanie Meyer? No.
Vampires do not sparkle. Vampires do not sparkle.
I had to be contentious there. Come on.
Stephanie, you wanted shouting? That's is what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to shout for you with no sparkly vampires.
Hey, Stephanie, what's Heroes?
Yeah.
Hero.
That's a great question. Hero likes anything with birds in it. He would like the birds.
It's that time of year, y'all. The birds are everywhere. I swear there was probably 50 million in my tree above my house, and I was like,
And the grackles are actually themselves horrifying. And
they really are. At dusk and dawn. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, I go through a parking lot and they dive bomb me when I get close to there. Yeah, that's straight up like, I've actually, I think, even hit one as it passed by.
Oh no.
That's nuts. Anyway, that's real life.
Well, guys, I think we got to wrap it up.
All right.
This was awesome. I see some other future podcasts.
And I do too.
I think it's so amazing. I learned a lot, actually. So I love it. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you to our lovely guests for being here. I think we definitely need to have you guys come back, because we sparked on a couple of topics that are really, really great. That I think our viewers would really like to hear more about from people who are educated but can still talk like where they can hear it and actually understand the words.
Indubitably. Concatenation.
If you're looking for something to do on Halloween, please join the Baronsmen for Tales of Darkness, the movie. It's a collection of spooky and dark scenes and monologues from a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, hosted by our evil triumvirate. You'll have to come and see to see who those are. You can visit our website and click on the Tales of Darkness slider for more information. We appreciate the viewers joining us today. We absolutely cannot do what we do without the support of patrons like you. To find out more about our donor program and how to become a part of that, visit thebaronsmen.org/donate. And until next time, we're Lee and Jackie, and we'll see you later.
Bye, guys.